afternoon. Seasoned citizens of Muscatine Cablevision crew are starting a series this afternoon on people who have made a difference in Muscatine. The next few months we are going to start a series talking with some men and women that have made things happen and have helped Muscatine and the surrounding area to be a better community and to be a community that we are proud of. This afternoon we are fortunate to have two of those gentlemen that have contributed much to the city and growth of Muscatine. On my right is A.A. Johnson, educator and former superintendent of schools of Muscatine. And on my left is Herman Cohn, a businessman that's been in business for many, many years here in Muscatine. So this afternoon we're just going to have a little conversation to find out a little bit more about these two people, what makes them tick, and what they've contributed in a way of just being a part of Muscatine over the many, many years. And Art, if I may call you that.
You certainly may.
Let's start out with, where did you get your start? Were you born in Muscatine?
No, I was not. I was born from American parents in Sweden. And for those of who are Swede, it would be Karlsson, Blekinge. My father and my mother's brothers were contractors in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. And my mother stayed in Sweden, and my father's younger brother ran a small farm we had there. My grandfather had a much bigger place. And so I was born there, and then I came over here and started kindergarten in Ottumwa, Iowa. And that was quite an experience, because when I started school, I could not speak a word of English. But within 6 months, I think, I was speaking quite well, at least well enough to converse with my fellow students. And it was quite interesting. So that is where the beginnings of things.
I see. That explains why then one of your nicknames is Swede?
No.
No, that's not the reason for that.
No, I was never called that for some reason or other.
I thought maybe in Kiwanis or one of those clubs that you were called Swede Johnson.
No, I was called a lot of things, but not that.
Possibly because there was a Swede Johnson, Dr. Johnson.
Yeah, that was
popularly known
all
as
right.
Johnson.
Oh, yes, okay. Herman, we're going to direct the same question to you. Did your roots start right here in Muscatine?
Yes, I was born out on East 7th Street, lived in the home until I went into the service, and the home is still standing there. At that time it was on a dirt street, of course, and the doctor had quite a little problem on that January day to get through with his horses to deliver me. That was back in 1910. There have been a lot of changes since that time, of course.
Was it known as Kecklerville in those days?
A little farther on was Kecklerville. I was on the 7th, right between Oak and Spring.
I see.
And Kecklerville just a little bit farther out, more toward Isett and toward where Heinz's were located.
Tell me a little bit about your family, Herman. You have other sisters and brothers?
Yes, I was a fifth child of a family of 3 brothers and 1 sister, all of whom I'm very sorry to say are deceased at this time. I'm the last family member that's here.
We're going to get back to you, Art. How about your family?
Well, my family, I had 1 sister who died shortly after birth. That's the oldest sister. And then I had a sister who died of cancer when she was 41, and then I have a sister who is living at Ottumwa, Iowa at the present time. She taught school there. And that is with my father and mother, of course, are both dead. And we had a very, very happy family, I think, and I was the only boy. I missed that a great deal because when I got in difficulty, it would have been nicer if I'd had a brother to back me up.
Right. You have several sons that I know about.
Yes, I have 2 sons. One of them is a lawyer who is a lawyer in Denver. He lives in Boulder. And then I have a son at Sacramento who has his doctor's degree in psychology, and he's working in the school system there.
Mm-hmm. Herman, I know you have at least one daughter because I read about her just recently in the Muscatine Journal.
No, I'm happy to say that I have two daughters of whom I'm very proud. The one to whom you refer is working at Harvard. She's the executive secretary to the dean of the Graduate School of Education, and has been there a number of years. My other daughter, the youngest daughter, is in Columbus, Ohio, and she had been involved in social work for a number of years, having received her master's some years ago. Currently, she is doing a doctorate, and as of now, she has completed all the research work and hopes to receive the degree by the end of the year.
We skipped over quite a bit of time here. Art, I'd like to know what your interests were as a boy.
Well, of course, I was always sort of interested in athletics. As a boy, of course, we played the neighborhood program of football and baseball. In baseball, I still have a few scars from that here and here. We couldn't afford a face mask, and I was catcher some part of the time. So the result is I got a few foul balls. But we had a lot of fun, and I had some very, very good friends. Of course, my best friend died during the war of influenza at Iowa City.
Hmm.
He was an Irishman. I was raised with a bunch of Irishmen. The only difficulty was that they liked to fight, and I wasn't quite as interested in that as they were.
Did you have some jobs when you were growing up?
No.
Carried papers or worked on a farm or anything like that?
No, well, I did. When I was a sophomore in high school, I very foolishly, I think, as I look back at my age, I dropped out of school and ran away for World War I. And served in the armed guards in the Navy. And then after that, I went to North Dakota and worked up there for a year and decided that was not for me, and I wrote then to several colleges and finally ended up at Morningside College, Sioux City, Iowa.
I see. Herman, how about you? What did you do when you were a little boy?
Well, the usual things, baseball, football, swimming, fishing. And of course, I remember in those days we had a lot of old games, which I don't believe I could explain today with such names as Duck on Davy and Run Sheep Run and all of those things. And we did play quite a little baseball, and I remember we used to get a ride in an old Model T Ford and would pack the whole team in that. And I remember the one day we drove to Wilton on the dirt roads, of course, and when we got there we could barely get out of the car, barely stand erect, and the Wilton Woolies beat us 30-3. It was quite a disastrous day for us.
It definitely wasn't a pitcher's battle.
No, that's correct.
Let's touch a little bit on education now. Art, let's start with you. You mentioned high school and Morningside, and did you study to be an educator, or did you have other plans?
No, I really studied to be an educator. I did go out for athletics. I played football, made lettered in football and track, but I was interested in education almost from the beginning. It was an interesting subject and had many facets connected with it that were interesting, including various phases of psychology. So I was rather set on that. The only other area that I was interested in all would have been law, but at that time it looked kind of distant because of the fact of the necessity for money.
So you started out as a
And
teacher?
I got my AB degree at Morningside. I got my master's degree at Iowa City, plus one extra year there. I thought I'd go for my doctorate, but a depression came along, and I had a family with, by that time, with one youngster, and I thought we better let... When I got the position here, I had been superintendent of schools at Hartley, Iowa, and my wife taught there too. And that's when I went back for the extra year, thinking I would go for my doctorate. But they offered me quite an inducement to stay up there, but I determined not to. And so I went to Iowa that year, and then the Depression came, and Van Hedding from here came up looking for an assistant principal at the high school here. So I talked to him, and he was quite persuasive, and I came down here. And the day I came down here, I also got a telegram from a college in Kentucky offered me a job there in a college. Well, I didn't take it for the very simple reason that colleges were usually paid, instructors in those days were usually paid in potatoes and other vegetables. So the result was that I took the job here, and of course was very happy with it. I have gone on to school since to take special courses. I took some courses in special education from Iowa State University, and I took some courses from an instructor from Princeton who I thought was one of the greatest teachers I ever had. So I had some special and very interesting courses.
When did you come to Muscatine?
I came to Muscatine in 1931, in the fall.
You came as a
Assistant principal of the high school.
You did some, didn't you do some teaching, Art, when you were in high
Yes, and of course I loved teaching. I had some interesting experience. I had one class of 37, all boys but one girl, which was interesting. I taught modern problems, which was right down my alley. We taught, try to keep up to date on things that were happening, as well as the background for things that were happening, and which made it one of the very interesting courses, I think, as far as I was concerned. I always told my classes, now, I don't know how you people are going to feel about this. I'm going to enjoy myself. I hope you do. I don't know whether you will or not.
Herman, you graduated, I think, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, in 1927.
27 is right.
So you were out of high school before Art came into the high school. But you have a very interesting story that involves junior college. And I know Art here is very proud of our junior college, and I know you are too. Tell us a little bit about your junior college experience.
Well, as you said, I did graduate in 27, went into business the same year. And when the junior college was first talked about, they asked me about coming in, and which I decided to do. And it so happened that I had given them the first check for tuition, which was $50 at that time, and they accept with a proviso that if they didn't get enough people enrolled, that they would return the check. But as of today's mail, it hasn't come back yet. But I've always felt very good about my experience with junior college. I think we had some wonderful teachers, and an institution that was just starting. We were real fortunate to have the quality of people that we had there. I was a little slow in getting through. I started, in fact, I have a plaque that they presented me with as a member of the first class. And I started in 29, and I took only 1 or 2 subjects at the time because I was working 75 or 80 hours a week. And of course, the police would take a dim view of it today, but I used to, when I'd be delivering papers and that, I'd put one of the textbooks on the wheel and I would be studying as I'd be out making deliveries and so on. As a result, in the late 30s, I still hadn't graduated. There was a few courses I hadn't finished, and when time was coming up for Army service, I decided I better finish that. So I went back and took, I think I had one final exam to do and one paper to write. And my diploma is dated 1939, so I've been known as a long time as the slowest student there. Entered in 29 and finished in 39. However, my record there wasn't too bad, with the exception of one semester of B+ chemistry. I did have a 4-point. I was quite proud of that at the time, but disappointed I didn't get an A- instead of B+ for that one semester.
Do you remember any of the instructors when you started out at that time it was junior college?
Yeah, junior college. Well, of course, the one that you think of first is Willetta Strand, who did a marvelous job on it. Others, well, let me see.
Lichty.
Yeah, E.A. Lichty was psychology,
Mm-hmm.
was very good. And
Gackle there then.
I think she
later.
came, I think Louise was just a little bit later. There was a math teacher who was very good. I just can't call her name.
Mm-hmm.
Gold came later also.
Goad was, yeah, quite a bit later.
Art, you have a special interest in junior college as well. Wasn't that under the jurisdiction of the Muscatine School Board?
Yes, it was, and I am very proud of the part that I had in the junior college because at the time that the junior colleges was organized in the state of Iowa, I happened to be president of the superintendents, which we were at that time, of the junior colleges of Iowa. And myself, together with Fred Scher of Clinton and our own Jim Loper, we pretty much set up the program for the present junior college program in Iowa, which our objectives were that every student in Iowa would be within driving distance of a junior college. And a good many of us in the state wanted us to have the junior college merely for vocational. But we also wanted the transfer students who could go for the liberal arts for the simple reason that it gave the people who were a little short of money, and these were Depression years, an opportunity to at least get a 2-year start on the liberal arts program with very little expenditures. So we fought to keep that into the program, and we got it into the program. We also I was also instrumental in having the junior college district. For example, we have the Clinton, Scott, Muscatine County as a unit. In other words, the concept that a campus had to be in one area is wrong. The campus can be in a scattered area. And so we, there was a good deal of feeling. They thought maybe that one of the cities would dominate. Mm-hmm. It never did. I went up to, had the opportunity to go up and speak to the board at Clinton, who didn't really, they were scared to come in. And I talked to the board up there, and they finally agreed to come in and become part of this area school that we have at the present time. So I did have quite a little bit to do with the beginnings of the present junior college program in the state of Iowa.
Now, the physical location of junior college started where? Was it the old high school?
No, it started in Jefferson.
Jefferson.
At the north wing, there were 2 rooms. on the upper floor on the north side. And then, of course, they moved over to the old school on the corner there that was torn down, grade school.
Jackson?
Huh?
Jackson School?
Jackson School. And
that where you
they
went,
were
Herman?
quite comfortable there, actually. Well, when we established the high school, of course, we established it at that place because we had to have a fairly central location. We were getting students from East Hill, South Muscatine, all over, so we just couldn't put it out in the area where it was difficult for them to go. So we established it there, which meant that Jackson School had to be torn down and the junior college had to be moved. So we moved into the Hershey building, the top floor. And we had one advantage. Our students went to school in an elevator. And we fixed that up. We put partitions in there, and we put radiators in there, and it operated for a considerable length of time. Now, a good many ask, why didn't you run a program and establish a new junior college sooner? And well, it was Depression years. People weren't going to vote big expenditures. They were voting down anything that came up. So the next move was, of course, at Franklin School. And I don't think the junior college was hurt in any of the moves. After all, the old concept of a school as a teacher at one end of the log and the student at the other is still a pretty good concept. The important thing is, of course, that you have a teacher and a student. If you have good teachers, you have a good program. There's no doubt about it. So they moved a lot.
Actually, for quite a bit of time, we really didn't have what we considered a real home. We had the high school annex on 5th Street was used quite a little for classes also.
Now, where was that, Herman?
That was on 5th, right about the second
yes,
or
down
third house.
at the bottom
from-
floor.
Yeah.
You're right. I missed that. I missed that.
But one thing is very interesting, of course, with the teachers, as we mentioned, another one was who was very instrumental in keeping things going was Lucille Couts.
Yes.
Was a very
Grand
fine-
person.
Yeah, very good. And the junior college that we built here was the first junior college, as I remember, built in the state for the express purpose of housing a college. And that was always very interesting.
Well, there was either Muscatine or Mason City. It was about the same time.
About the same time. And then some point in time it became Muscatine Community College.
Yes. Well, of course, the concept of community was important because the community area opened up that the junior college was not only to have transfer students, but to have courses that would help the community. In other words, help your business organization. It's amazing if you would ever make a study to find out how many graduates of junior college have been active in business community, in business areas in Muscatine, and have contributed considerably. And then the number, of course, who have gone on in the professions after graduating from junior college, who probably would not have gone to college otherwise.
I think that's a very important point because I know many youngsters who just couldn't afford to go to college, but when they get the first 2 years here, they could live at home. And the college took care of them in that the credits were easily transferable to another institution. And that it worked out very well.
Herman, you touched just briefly, and I wanted to draw you out a little bit more about your business experience. You said something like when you were a senior in high school, I think, or maybe before that, you got into business for yourself.
Well, actually, I had started working for George Evans, who was a distributor of magazines and papers, and he had a retail store next at 204 East 2nd, actually located. It's where the new, and there's a new shop there now called Traditions, I believe. And in 1922, we moved to the present location on 3rd Street. And one day after school, I was washing the windows, and Mr. Evans was talking with a Chicago Tribune representative and said he was considering selling the newspaper franchises. And after the man left, I asked Mr. Evans if he would consider selling to me. And he perceived that to be real funny, because he really had a good laugh out of that. But I pursued it, and finally I was able to get a 30-day option from him to see if I could raise the money. And I was able to do so. So I graduated in June of 27 and made the arrangements during June and July. And then the 1st of August of 27, I actually started for myself. And in those early years, the Journal here a couple of years ago had a 50-year-ago story about that I had been named the youngest businessman in the country, or in the world, I guess that's which I rather doubt. But that was just a couple, it would have been, it had been in 77, I guess it's longer than a few years ago. So that's how I got started, and then 2 years later, the junior college came up, and I went back to there.
Something got started in your place of business, a little coffee gathering. A few men got together, and why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Because you and Art here are both involved in that group today.
We started that in the store when we had a fountain luncheonette. That started back in 1956, and it was there for 22 years. And then we moved to the hotel, and we still meet 5 days a week. And of course we conduct all the business of the world there and make all the decisions and so on.
And it's just as bad the next Monday when we come back.
We have just 2 classes of members.
I see.
Those who wear hearing aids and those who don't but need them. And our senior of the group is George Sprague, who's 91 years of age, and he's our supreme commander of rules and regulations.
Sounds impressive.
Very, very much so. Our youngest member is just a mere lad of 54. He's Jerry Tesman, who is currently the chief of police in Muscatine. Interestingly enough, in our group we have 4 former mayors. We have Claire York, Don Platt, Walter Conway, and Kelly Burns.
Oh, yeah.
So we're really in good company there.
Right. I attended your coffee get-together one morning a couple of weeks ago. You have a unique way of getting your money to pay for this group. You keep a set of books and history, and this is a very organized group.
Sure.
Is it tough to get into? Or?
Well, not really. If you have the money to pay for coffee, you get stuck, you're in. I might tell you how we arrive at the person who pays. In the conversation, whoever paid the day before picks out a word and writes that down on the back of the check. And then anyone may start with any letter of the alphabet. And it goes around the table. And whoever calls the letter, the first letter of the word, he's the one who pays. He's the one who gets stuck. Then the next day, he puts down the letter.
I see.
So it works out okay. It's a fair way of doing it, but sometimes you may get stuck 3-4 times in a row, and then again you may not pay for a month or so.
There is a limit, though.
Yeah.
There is a limit.
After you pay for 200 cups, then you're free for the rest of the year. And I'm happy to say we have just one member who's reached that plateau this year, Mr. Johnson. He has a way how to do it.
I'm a little bit surprised that you got Art in on this, because if I remember right, when he was the superintendent of schools, he kept the belt pretty tight on expenses.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one of the things that I can remember from going through the schools. There were not a lot of frills. They were all necessities.
That's right.
But he always watched our tax dollar, and I always thought that was great.
Well, I had one of the board members that said that I had a little of Herman's blood in my veins.
Well, you gentlemen were close there. You were only about a half a block apart because your office was in the city hall, and Herman was just across the street running his place of business. Right. This might be a kind of a silly question, but all the young people have heroes. I think today there's a lot of rock stars that are heroes of our young people. Back when you two gentlemen were growing up, did you have any heroes?
If I did, I really don't recall having. There are a lot of people that I knew in, our daily living. Even in the schools, and teachers and so on, customers whom I had when I first started to work and so on. But I don't really perceive them as heroes as such. Like, we idolize, the kids today idolize certain people, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really ever recall that.
How about you, Art?
Well, pretty much the same way. I had some great teachers. I had some poor teachers, too. But I am, if I do say so, a great reader. I still read about 5 books a week. And not all of them are heavy books. But I get my heroes from history, and there are some great heroes, of course, in history. Even some of them Confederates that I thought were great, like Lee was a great man. There's no doubt about it. Stonewall Jackson was a great man, a religious man. Washington, all the rest of them. You can certainly tie yourself to those individuals, and you won't lose much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The thought just occurred to me that, Art, I remember you very distinctly in a study hall in the old Muscatine High School. I think it was 825.
Correct.
And that was quite a challenge for anyone, but you just took it in stride and kept the discipline and the studying and all those good things.
Well, I would rather have had classwork, but in those days they felt as though a lady could not quite handle that situation, and so I was put in there. We also had the honor study hall, which was quite an experiment, and by and large worked pretty well.
That was in the library, wasn't it?
That was in 24 across the way.
Mm-hmm.
It worked real well. And, there were some problems down then. Actually, when that group disciplined someone, they were a lot tougher than teachers, which often happened. But it was, I had some funny experiences. I knew one person, he was writing, and he didn't seem to be studying anything. I went over to him, and I said, "What are you doing?" And he kind of hid it. And I said, "Well, could I see what you're doing?" And he says, "Well," he says, "all right." And he was writing a story, and it was very good. And Drake at that time had a contest. I said, "Do you mind if I send that in?" "Well," he said, "it isn't very good, but if you want to, go ahead." I sent it in. He won first place.
Wow.
He became a writer.
I see. Huh. Well, that's interesting. I remember a story you shared with me several weeks ago about, or maybe Herman was telling us about you, about a couple boys that were headed for the Mississippi River going fishing one morning.
Well, Herman was telling that story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When we were talking about getting the auditorium built or named after the A.A. Johnson Auditorium at Central Middle High. Of course, I had talked to a lot of people who signed the petition. Some 600 of them signed it. And the thing that intrigued me that most everybody had a a heartwarming story to tell about him, how much they loved the man and how they thought that that would be the best name possible. And this one young lad said that the one thing he always liked about him, that he would never be confrontational, and yet he would get accomplished what needed to be accomplished. And he said he and a friend were, instead of going to school one morning, they were going down to the river to fish. And Mr. Johnson came along in his car, and he said, "Get in." And they got in. He merely took him to school, and nothing was said, and they went on to classes. So I asked the youngster, well, did he know what you were up to? Well, he said it was time for school, and we were heading toward the river with our pail and fishing pole. So he said he'd always been impressed with that all through his life, the things that he could get so many things done without raising any kind of a fuss. Just a very simple expedient of taking them to school, and that took care of the problem.
We want to touch a little bit on what I know you two gentlemen are not just sitting back in a rocking chair getting old. I'd like to just touch a little bit on what you're involved in today. Herman, let's start with you.
Well, currently I'm president of Voluntary Action Center. I'm the local chairman for the Shrine Crippled Children's Hospital. And a week from today, actually, we'll be having another clinic, which will be our 6th annual. I had established that back starting in 1982. I'm president of the B'nai Moses Synagogue, and we've just completed a fundraising drive and have started a perpetual care fund, trust fund that the bank will administer. And, of course, and I'm active in various Masonic activities.
This Voluntary Action Council now, what does that really entail? Can you get a plug in here for that, that group?
It's really a tremendous organization. We have approximately 500 volunteers, and we supply volunteers for to any agency in town that needs them. Just to give you kind of an example, last year we had provided over 30,000 hours in the community, and according to the State Department of Volunteerism, that is worth over $200,000. Now, we did that on a budget of last year our budget was $13,000, which is funded primarily by the United Way. Now, one thing that we're able to do, many of the groceries supply us with fruits and vegetables. Many farmers supply us with surplus commodities. And, of course, the government makes a distribution of cheeses and that, which we take care of regularly. And the reason it's such a wonderful program because we're able to make use of food that would be wasted otherwise, and which many people really sorely need.
You can always use more volunteers.
Yes, they're always looking for more. There's never any pressure on doing a job. You may work an hour a week or an hour every 6 weeks or whenever. And the reason we need so many volunteers, if they have a certain need, if they call you and it isn't convenient to do it that day, you merely say so. They just call the next volunteer. There's never any pressure. But we cover the entire gamut of public service in Muscatine. We continually have new programs. One of our programs that's only a couple of years old now is the alternate sentencing program, in which we work with the probation officer on first-time offenders. Instead of having them spend time in jail, we assign them to public service jobs. They'll work for normally any nonprofit organization. They receive no pay, so they're doing work for that organization. In many cases, it's worked out so well but the people have been hired after their sentencing is over.
So you have the jurisdiction, or your group makes the placements.
Yes.
And I see.
Another important thing that we're just into now is the information referral service on any problems that we may be called, and we refer the person to where they should go.
Art, I understand that you are a member of the Care Review Committee. Is that the proper title for that?
Yeah, at the Lutheran's home.
At the Lutheran's home.
I have really served my share. I am on some of that, but I was president of the Superintendent's Club in Iowa. I was president of the 33 Club. I was president of Kiwanis Club. I was president of local NEA, but now what I do, I go out there. I was president of that. I just turned it over to John Wessel because I'd been president for about 6 years, and I thought someone else should be president. I'm still on the committee. And then on Sunday, I go out to the nursing homes and see people that I know. And I see quite a number of them. One of them is someone you know, Joe Van Uyseldyke. He's out the care center, and I think he's happy to see me every Sunday, and I see quite a number of people. I don't know that I do any good, but at least I go out and see him, and once in a while we have a joke between us. Maybe it gives them something to think about, and whether it helps them or not helps me.
Yeah, right. That's a tremendous service. It's really a ministry.
And then I did get, as a result, I got a third place commendation from the governor of the state of Iowa last year on some of the services I've been doing along that line.
Art, I recall in one of our former conversations, you mentioned something about getting a letter or two.
I get a letter every once in a while, and they're heartwarming. But one was really quite interesting. A former student, when I was assistant principal, sent me a letter, and he says, "I have reached the age of 60." And he said, "I am writing to all of the people who some way or other have helped me in life, and I'm thanking him for the help that they have given me." And I thought that was a real nice thing. And then sometimes they overdo it. I helped a person over a little hurdle one time, and so he wrote me a letter and says, "I have a nice home, beautiful wife and children, and a good job," and he says, "I owe it all to you." Of course, he didn't. He just had a lot of ability. He just got over that one little hump, and he was on his way. But I get those once in a while, and I appreciate them. And I hope to goodness that my life's work has been such that that I have helped someone. This teaching is a dangerous thing. One word or one sentence by a teacher can ruin a person or make a person. And that comes home to you after you have taught quite a while. I try to tell the teachers when I was superintendent of schools how dangerous their profession is. And I've made my mistakes. And I suspect every teacher has made their mistakes, but it is an opportunity, but it's also dangerous.
I think in so many cases that the young people spend probably as much time with their teachers as they do with their mom and dad. And
well, sometimes the teacher is in some cases, sorry to say, they're more important.
Weren't you also president of 33 Club?
Yes, he mentioned
Did you
that.
mention 33? And then on the NEA, you were president of that, I believe.
Well, I was a local chapter.
Local, yeah.
When I became superintendent of schools, they had a rule that the superintendents could not belong But the second year I was superintendent, they had a special meeting and voted me in. So I appreciate that from the teachers.
Yeah, it's really quite an honor, I would have.
It was an honor,
Okay.
and I appreciate it.
I just wonder if there's some area that maybe we haven't covered yet that you would like to leave with our Cablevision audience. Herman, do you have anything there that maybe I haven't covered that you would like to share with the people of Muscatine? I know from time to time I get comments from young people as well as old people that pick up our program here and thank us for just interviewing people and touching areas that bring back some fond memories. And I just thought maybe you might have something that we haven't touched yet, or Art, maybe you have something. One of the questions I would like to ask before we finish this program is how you'd like to be remembered in Muscatine. Herman, do you have any thoughts along that line? I know when that sand in the hourglass gets towards the end, we begin to think in terms of how we'd like to be remembered, and maybe some of the things that we'd still like to accomplish before the sand runs out. So maybe some philosophical answer to that question might be.
Well, probably like to remember as one who recognized the needs of some worthy people and did something in order to help them along and accomplish things that they might not have been able to do otherwise. But,
Well, I would hopefully like to remember as someone who helped people in a positive way. I'm sure that we all make mistakes, and at times I can look back and there are several things I would have done a little bit differently. But by and large, I hope that I have helped people and that they have profited a little by my being around. I want to say one thing. There's a mistake a lot of times. I have never, and I've had parents come down to me very, very angry. Sometimes they'd come down and say, I want that teacher fired right now. But I have never run across a parent who wasn't interested in their sons and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
And you, as a teacher, one has to remember that they are interested. And you take their interest and go from there. And sometimes you talk to them a little while and they've changed their whole attitude. They're just as nice as they can be. And fundamentally, they're nice people.
Mm-hmm. I had the privilege of being in the Franklin School yesterday afternoon when they observed the 200th anniversary of our Constitution. And I was pleasantly surprised. These kids were from kindergarten through 5th grade, and they had them all in the gymnasium. Now that kind of a situation lends to a lot of little side play and so forth, but those young people were just real gentlemen and ladies. And I made a comment to one of the teachers afterwards. I said, you really have done a job with these people. They're just perfect, because it was probably a half-hour program, and it drug a little bit because they were talking about some of the things that maybe the kindergarten couldn't comprehend to begin with. But she said, I was interested in this comment. She said, we have a bunch of good kids here in Franklin. And I think that attitude from a teacher reflects to the kids, and they respond accordingly, I think. So I was pleasantly surprised with the...
We always seem to have had pretty good teachers. Miss Friedrichsen was a nice lady.
Mm-hmm.
She was at Franklin for years, you know.
Yeah, right, yeah. I was on the building committee back quite a few years ago when you were thinking of building programs at the various grade schools, and I know I visited several different areas to encourage them to vote for the bond issue. And I remember talking to you at one time, and I said, well, Mr. Johnson, I've almost flunked English because I just could not get up in front of people and talk. And I remember you said, just know your subject and get up there talk in a conversational way. No problem, he said. Those people out there won't won't bite you. We haven't lost anybody speaking to people, and that was a real encouragement later on in my life, coming from you.
Well, at Franklin School, the committee located that place. It's the best place for Franklin School down there. And I hadn't even thought of it. And Mrs. Axel was on that, you remember?
Yes.
Great lady.
Yeah.
Anyway, and you and some of the rest of them, and they located that location for us. And I brought it up before the board, and they thought, gee, that's a great place. It's out of the flood area.
Yeah, yeah, right. Yeah. Well, we probably have left some questions maybe with some of the people wondering why Herman Cohn and Art Johnson would be on the same program. But I see education and business going hand in hand. After all, education leads into a business field, and so I've enjoyed visiting with you two gentlemen today, and we're looking forward to meeting with other people in the community that have been influenced by Herman Cohn and Art Johnson. One question just popped into my mind, Art, and I might even embarrass you. A. Johnson. Now, I knew the first letter was Arthur. What did
It's worse than that. It's Arthur Alfred.
Arthur Alfred. I bet there's a lot of people in Muscatine never knew what that A
But they
stood
were,
for.
I was called A square, and had all kinds of, by the way, I do want to say, I want to compliment the station on having this type of a program, because, not because of we're on it particularly, but because of the other people you will have on here. It is educational, and I think, I have never quite seen anything quite like it, and I think it's quite unique and quite helpful and quite educational.
This station has been more than cooperative out here. They've given us a time slot on Thursday afternoons, and we have pretty well complete freedom as to who we have on, and the crew here at the station just is more than helpful, and we really appreciate working with these people.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting Lou Byer a year ago, and I wasn't aware of the program until she talked to me about it. And you may remember that we took the coffee club out to the mall and viewed 3 videos from 3 of our members at that time. And it was most enjoyable, and I heard so much wonderful comment on that. So many people would say that you're really preserving a piece of history that would be lost entirely, because most everyone has something to contribute that would be lost otherwise. And
I have a great respect for that man over there.
thank you, sir.
He not only contributes to a good many Jewish things, he gives to Protestant churches. I don't know whether he just wants to call all bets and
Well, I think Herman does a lot of things that we don't know about.
a great many things.
That he probably doesn't even want any recognition for, but just enjoys doing
He
things
never
for
talks
people.
about them. You have to find them out the hard way.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
probably good that people don't know some of the things I do.
What do you see for the future of Muscatine?
Well, I'll tell you, I notice that in Muscatine has more traffic than any town, and I really think it is on the up and go. I really think so. And I think that we have the people. We have some of the finest people in the world. There is no city in the state of Iowa as friendly as Muscatine. If anyone needs help, there's no city in Iowa that will help them quicker than people in Muscatine. I have been in a number of cities. I know what I'm talking about. Muscatine is I hate to use the expression old shoe, but they fit, and you feel so comfortable living in a city of this type because of the people. They're grand people.
There's nothing more rewarding to me than to walk up Iowa Avenue or down 2nd Street and be able to call several people by their first name and stop and talk for a while.
I was talking to Jack Richards. He comes from the east, and I told him about the friendlies of Muscatine. He says, you know, he says, I came to Muscatine and I came down 2nd Street and people said hello. She says, I was almost shocked. Nobody would ever say hello to me anywhere else.
quite a number of years ago, I had an Army buddy of mine came to Muscatine to visit. And during the visit, we took a walk downtown. And he really accused me of setting this walk up because almost everyone called me by name and I called them by name. He said that just isn't possible because he came from Brooklyn, when you may not even know your next door neighbor, of course. So,
What do you see for the future of Muscatine?
well, thinking of our downtown area, of course, has deteriorated. But I think we're at the bottom of that now. And it looks to me as though now with the hiring of this man who's working on the downtown area and so on, I really believe that we're going to be turning around now. We've lost far too many businesses downtown. Every city needs a downtown core, and some have been very successful in rebuilding it again. And I think we're at that point. Cooperation, the people seem to want to cooperate now better than before, and I think we're on the right track.
Art, Ron Hansen mentioned one of the areas that he would like to see us do a little bit more about was keeping our young people in Muscatine after they get their education. Do you see any possibilities there that we could move into that would encourage maybe some of our young people to...
I'm not so sure that would even be a wise move. I think that this is something where in our country they have to go wherever they feel they want to go or where they're needed so they'll be comfortable the rest of their life. We have a good many of them come back. They go out and find out, well, gee, this is where I belong back there. And I'm surprised a number of people who live somewhere else and they come back and says we're the happiest here when we come for a visit. So I'm not so sure we should try to teach it or force them on this issue. I think this is something that has to come naturally and on the natural spread of business and activities. I think we're getting a good share of them, and we're getting some pretty good ones. You look at our business enterprise, and we have quite a number.
Matter of fact, I talked to a gentleman yesterday from Florida who thinks he's going to move back to Muscatine. So people do come and go. Of course, the thing that it seems to me that dictates whether a young person stays or not is what opportunities they have in a particular field that they're interested in. And often, a person who's just completed an education, he has a goal, and he can't fulfill that here. But
well, it's like a young person. They want to try their wings. They want to get away from home.
Right.
It's the same thing we're talking about.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciated you taking the time this afternoon to just chat a little bit about things in Muscatine, the contributions you have made, and we just really appreciate it. So thank you, Mr. Johnson and Mr. Cohn.
you're very welcome. It's been my pleasure. I've enjoyed it. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you out there in Cablevision land, and we hope you enjoy this program. And if you have any ideas as to future people that we can talk to and get a little history of Muscatine, we'd appreciate any comments from you. Thank you, and good afternoon.